I never thought my marriage would end like this, betrayed by the woman I trusted most. But what came next wasn't just heartbreak, it was the start of a journey that would change my life forever. Before that moment at the traffic light, my life had already started to crumble. The signs were there, scattered like pieces of a puzzle I had stubbornly refused to piece together. Rachel had been distant for months. Her laughter became subdued, her touch colder. I chalked it up to stress, maybe exhaustion or the creeping weariness of middle age. Deep down, I didn't want to believe it was something more than that. The first Betrayal warning came about 2 weeks earlier. Rachel had forgotten our anniversary. In nearly 2 decades together, she had never missed it before. We weren't the type to go all out with lavish gifts or extravagant dinners, but we always made time for small gestures, a card, a quiet moment, a few heartfelt words. This year? She didn't even mention the date. When I brought it up later, she looked completely caught off guard, like it hadn't crossed her mind. That should have been enough to prompt me to ask more pointed questions, to dig deeper. But I didn't. I let it slide. Then there was her phone. Rachel had never been the type to obsess over her devices. She used to leave her phone charging on the counter while cooking or in the bedroom overnight. But recently, it was always with her, clutched tightly in her hand or stashed away in her pocket. She even started sleeping with it tucked under her pillow. When I asked about it casually, she gave a light-hearted laugh and claimed that work had been overwhelming. "I don't want to miss anything important," she had said. The explanation seemed plausible, but the way she avoided my eyes told a different story. About a week before that fateful moment at the light, I ran into one of Rachel's coworkers at the grocery store, a woman named Carla. We'd always been on friendly but not overly familiar terms. That day, something was off. Her smile was strained, her posture awkward, as though she were grappling with something she didn't know how to say. "Hey, Oliver," she greeted me, shifting uncomfortably. "How's everything going?" Her tone carried a strange undertone, something apologetic, as if she knew a secret I didn't. The conversation was short, but it left me uneasy. Then, just 3 nights before I found myself staring at that red light, Rachel had come home extremely late. Much later than usual. I had been waiting in the living room, pretending to scroll aimlessly through my phone, but in reality, I was listening for the sound of Rachel's car. When she finally walked in, she barely glanced in my direction. "Long day," she muttered under her breath before heading straight to the shower. Normally, she'd collapse onto the couch, kick off her heels, and unload a stream of office gossip or frustrations. But that night, it was like I wasn't even there. She disappeared upstairs without a second thought. I should have stopped her. I should have asked where she'd been, who she was with, and why she was acting so detached. But I didn't. Maybe I was too scared to hear the answer. Maybe, deep down, I already knew the truth. Instead of confronting the situation head-on, I chose denial, as if avoiding the truth could somehow keep my world intact. Of course, denial only delays the inevitable. They say nothing good comes from being somewhere you don't belong. I'd soon learn how true that was. But this time, it wasn't like I'd gone looking for trouble, it found me. I was minding my own business, stopped at a red light, when the driver in the car next to mine waved for me to roll down my window. His face was partially obscured by dark sunglasses, one arm resting casually on the door. "Hey, your tire's going flat," he called out. Instinctively, I glanced at my dashboard. No warning lights. Still, there was something in his voice that made me uneasy. I figured it was better to be cautious than ignore the advice. I nodded in thanks and pulled into a nearby parking lot to check things out. Sure enough, a screw was embedded deep in the tire tread, letting out a slow, steady hiss of air. "Great," I muttered to myself. With no better option, I walked into a nearby store and grabbed a can of tire sealant. Back at the car, I hesitated for a moment, then made the mistake of yanking the screw out. Immediately, the air rushed out faster than before. Panicking, I tried to jam the screw back in, hoping to slow the leak while I worked. I managed to inflate the tire at a nearby gas station and prayed it would hold for the 50 miles I still had to drive home. 5 miles from home, I checked my side mirror. The tire was sagging again. Frustrated, I pulled into a convenience store, hoping they'd have an air pump. No such luck. With no other options, I attached the sealant and twisted it into place. Green slime oozed into the puncture, and thankfully, the hissing stopped. I sighed in relief, just about to get back into my car. I heard an engine, a massive, lifted pickup truck rolled into the parking lot with a low, guttural rumble. My body tensed, frozen in place as I watched them emerge from the vehicle. Rachel. Hand in hand with another man. Her laughter echoed through the air, light and carefree, cutting through me like a blade. My chest tightened, the breath stolen from my lungs. It was as if someone had delivered a punch straight to my gut. I stood there, numb and motionless, watching like some pathetic fool. Then it hit me, recognition. That truck. I'd seen it before, parked outside the psychiatric clinic where Rachel worked. The man's name surfaced in my mind, Jerry Garner. He was a social worker there. A sick realization gnawed at me, why wasn't Rachel at work? What was she doing here with him? They walked out of the store a few minutes later, coffee cups in hand, deep in conversation, completely oblivious to me standing just yards away. I clenched my fists, every part of me overheating like I was burning from the inside out. I needed answers, but confronting them here wasn't the right move. When I finally got home, the house was eerily quiet. Everything seemed normal, too normal. I went upstairs and saw the bed neatly made with fresh sheets. My stomach churned at the sight. I slid down the wall, resting my head against the cool drywall, feeling utterly hollow inside. There was no escaping the conclusion, Rachel was cheating on me. For 30 agonizing minutes, I sat there, trying to force my mind to accept the truth, though every part of me resisted. It felt surreal, like I had stumbled into some grotesque nightmare. Nausea clawed at my insides as I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. Later that afternoon, I picked up our daughter from school. She hopped into the front seat, tossing her backpack into the back. Her hair was Rachel's, thick, chestnut brown, but her eyes, hazel with flecks of gold and green, were uniquely her own. I'd never seen another pair like them. She turned to greet me but immediately froze, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Dad, what happened? You look sick. Is something wrong? Is Mom okay?" I swallowed hard and forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, kitten. No one's hurt, no one's sick. But, we need to talk." She frowned, her lips tightening with worry. "Can't it wait? Let's go to the park first," she pleaded softly. I hesitated, then reached over and pulled her into a hug. "Just let me hold you for a minute, okay?" I whispered. She nodded, resting her head against my shoulder. In that moment, I marveled at her strength. She was braver than I felt right then. Eventually, she tugged at my hand. "Come on. Want me to drive?" she asked with a hopeful glint in her eye. She had just gotten her learner's permit and was excited about any chance to practice. For a second, her eyes lit up, but then reality crept back in, and the excitement dimmed. Still, she nodded and climbed behind the wheel. She drove with precision and care, every move deliberate, as if the weight of the moment hung over her too. When we pulled into the driveway, Rachel's car was already in the garage. She was home. Rachel greeted us at the door with a smile, acting like everything was perfectly normal, like she wasn't a liar, a cheat, a fraud. "Hey, you two. Feel like takeout tonight," she chirped as if she hadn't been sneaking around with another man just hours earlier. I couldn't play along. "Takeout can wait," I said flatly. "How's Jerry doing these days? He's your boss, right? What's his number?" Rachel's face immediately darkened. Her expression shifted from casual to defensive. He works the night shift. He's probably sleeping, she replied, crossing her arms. Is this a setup? What do you think I did? I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. I think you trapped yourself. And we both know you're lying. Why, Rachel? Her mind raced, searching for an excuse but coming up empty. Finally, she let out a sigh and admitted, fine. I was home earlier. But this is exactly why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd jump to conclusions. No one accused you of anything, our daughter Toby interjected sharply. But now I am. You made Dad look crazy to protect yourself. Why? What's going on? Rachel's face twisted in frustration. This is insane. Toby shot to her feet, anger blazing in her eyes. I'm not living with that creep, she shouted. The tension thickened, every unspoken word hanging between us like a storm ready to break. There was no going back now. The truth was coming, whether Rachel wanted to face it or not. He looks at me like I'm something to eat, Toby spat, glaring at Rachel with a fury I'd never seen before. And you're right. I'll see Dad whenever I want because I'm living with him. It's you I won't be seeing anymore. How could you do this? Rachel opened her mouth, but Toby didn't give her a chance to respond. She spun around, marched upstairs, and slammed her bedroom door. The sharp click of the lock echoed through the house. Rachel let out a sigh and turned to me, her expression caught somewhere between frustration and disbelief. She'll adjust, Rachel murmured, as if saying it aloud might make it true. Jerry's a good guy, Oliver. Once you get to know him. Don't even start. I cut her off, my voice cold and sharp enough to make her pause. Anger flickered briefly across her face. And where exactly am I supposed to go now, she asked, her voice trembling slightly. You're really just kicking me out like I'm nothing. I shrugged. Not my problem. Maybe check into one of those motels where people like you go to do their dirty work. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. That's cruel, Oliver, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't choose to fall for Jerry, it just happened. We connected. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped me. Oh, right. You tripped and fell into love, like a kid running with scissors and accidentally stabbing himself. The anger in me burned away, leaving nothing but icy resolve. You must be out of your mind, I said, my voice low and steady. Friends with you? With him? Never. Rachel flinched but remained silent as I continued. Tell that sorry excuse for a man to stay the hell out of my way. And as for you? You're nothing to me now. You've got 3 days. After that, I never want to see your face again. Her tears started to fall then, but I didn't care. First thing tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. You'll get your divorce faster than you expected. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, trying to stammer something about handling things maturely. It didn't matter. I was done. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, my mind still racing. I called my boss and explained the situation. He didn't ask many questions, just told me to take as much time as I needed. I brewed coffee and sat in silence at the kitchen table, letting the stillness settle around me. After a while, I made breakfast for Toby and me. When she came downstairs, she looked exhausted but composed. She ate quietly, not saying a word. Rachel appeared a few minutes later, acting like nothing had happened. She poured herself some coffee and tried to engage in small talk, but neither Toby nor I responded. The air was thick with tension, the kind you could almost taste. When we finished eating, I stood up and said, "Time to go." Rachel turned to Toby, plastering on a strained smile. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Toby didn't even glance in her direction. "I'm going with Dad," she said flatly, walking out the door without waiting for a response. Later that morning, I finally made the call. I contacted a colleague who had recommended a good lawyer for a friend in the past. He didn't hesitate. "That's exactly what you need," he said, and gave me the name. I pulled up the number and dialed. A receptionist answered, putting me on hold before I could finish explaining. I tapped my fingers on the counter, waiting, knowing this was just the beginning of a long, painful road ahead. But at least now, I had a direction. I wasn't going to let Rachel or anyone else take control of my life again. I laid out the situation to the lawyer, who immediately scheduled me for an afternoon consultation. That gave me a few hours to start making some preemptive moves. Rachel and I had shared investments that I couldn't access just yet, but there were other areas where I could act quickly. First on the list, cutting down our credit card limits to $500. I wasn't about to bankroll whatever fantasy life she was trying to build with Jerry. Once that was handled, I met with the attorney, Elizabeth Baxter. She was sharp and direct, with a reputation for being ruthless in court, a quality I needed on my side. She listened carefully, then gave me a confident nod. "With her circumstances, this should be manageable," she said. "The custody arrangement, given Toby's age and preferences, won't be an uphill battle." I locked eyes with her and nodded. "Good. Let's make it happen." Just like that, the wheels were in motion. Driving home, I kept my mind focused on the next steps. I wasn't going to be the victim in this mess. I needed a strategy. First, I planned to contact Jerry's wife. She had no idea what was coming, just like I hadn't. She deserved to know the truth. Second, Rachel's parents. They had always treated me like a son, and they adored Toby. But this news was going to shatter their world too. Before I could carry out those plans, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. Her voice was tense, almost panicked. "Oliver, take down the post," she hissed. "What post?" I said evenly, though I knew exactly what she meant. Word had spread, thanks to a few phone calls and some well-placed updates to social media. "You know what post?" "Jerry's wife doesn't know yet, my parents are freaking out, and my friends won't stop calling." "You're making this worse than it needs to be." I didn't hesitate. "No." Her tone sharpened. "What are you, a child? Take it down." I couldn't help but smirk. "You should be thanking me, Rachel. Now you don't have to hide. Everyone gets to celebrate your little love story." She exhaled sharply. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" I chuckled, cold and humorless. "Oh, what's the matter? You embarrassed? You don't like people knowing who you really are?" "You're unbelievable," she snapped before hanging up. On the drive home, Toby spoke up quietly. "So, I guess this is real now. You told everyone." "Yeah," I said. "I thought it was time." She sighed, staring out the window. "Mom's always been impulsive, but I never thought she'd do something like this." Her gaze hardened. "Dad, I don't ever want to be in the same house with that fool again. I don't care what you have to do, just make sure it never happens." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "I promise, Toby. It won't." We stopped for pizza on the way home, hoping to salvage what was left of a chaotic day. I had just started my second slice when my phone rang again. This time, it was Rachel's father. I braced myself, but to my surprise, he wasn't angry. "Oliver," he began, his voice steady but weary, "you know Rachel will always be my daughter, and will always be her parents. And I understand that you love her. But you have to do what's right for yourself and for Toby. I just hope. I hope you won't hate us for all this." "That'll never happen," I assured him. "And I'll get to the bottom of this. Call me if you need anything." The call went better than I had expected. He was devastated but understanding. No need to drag him through every ugly detail, anyone who's seen a divorce knows how brutal it can get. Rachel, for some reason, stayed in denial. She convinced herself that she still had a shot at custody, despite all the evidence stacked against her. But Elizabeth Baxter was relentless. By the time the court proceedings wrapped up, the judge had awarded me full custody, citing Rachel's instability and neglectful decisions as factors. Rachel's delusions came crashing down in the courtroom, but I felt no triumph in it. There were no winners here, just a broken family trying to make sense of what was left. Still, I knew one thing for sure: I would do everything in my power to protect Toby and give her a future free from this mess. And as far as Jerry, he'd better stay out of my way. I planned to keep them, I said firmly. Rachel gasped, while Rodman, her lawyer, looked scandalized. Oliver, how are we supposed to fix things if you won't even discuss them? Rachel demanded, frustration etched on her face. I shrugged, keeping my tone indifferent. Not my problem. Rodman cleared his throat and leaned forward. You do realize that if I report to the judge that you're refusing to cooperate, you could be held in contempt? I smirked. You mean if you lie about it? These sessions are recorded, right? I'm here, I'm answering your questions. That's called cooperation. His face flushed red with anger, but he didn't push the issue. He knew he couldn't spin the narrative in their favor today. Life slowly started settling into a new normal. Toby spent time with her grandparents occasionally, and Rachel made efforts to plan outings. Toby went along sometimes, but it wasn't the same anymore. Something inside her had shifted, and there was no going back. Despite everything, I was grateful to still be a part of her world. It gave me purpose. Her social life soon took center stage, and one friend, in particular, became a near-constant presence at our house, Sabrina. She was a small, energetic blonde with sharp wit, endless cheerfulness, and a level of charm that made her as endearing as a kitten. Before I knew it, Sabrina and Toby were dragging me into their weekend plans. One of their favorite activities was water skiing. I owned a boat, and during the summer, we made regular trips out to the lake. One weekend, during one of these trips, Sabrina's mother, Emma, joined us. It wasn't long before I noticed where Sabrina had inherited her vibrant personality. Emma was just as lively, her teasing humor matching her daughter's. Thanks for including me this weekend, Emma said, standing beside me as we watched the girls laugh on the boat. Honestly, I was starting to get jealous that they were spending so much time with you and not me. There was a playful tone in her voice, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I glanced at Toby, who gave me a very pointed look as if to say, "See? You're stuck with us now." My stomach did an unexpected flip, a feeling I wasn't ready for. For a moment, I felt the weight of everything in my life lift, just slightly. Then I made the mistake of looking at Sabrina, who raised an eyebrow, daring me to object to whatever scheme they had cooked up next. This whole weekend was starting to feel suspiciously like a setup. Sighing, I stepped forward and pulled Emma into a quick, friendly hug. She stiffened at first, caught off guard, but then relaxed and chuckled softly. "Yeah, it's awkward," I admitted. "Those two are little troublemakers, but you and I both know they didn't do anything wrong." She smiled warmly. "No, they didn't. They're just trying to take care of us in their own way." The moment stretched for a beat longer than expected, comfortable yet unfamiliar. Maybe, just maybe, life was starting to rebuild itself one step at a time. I studied Julie's face for a moment, trying to gauge her. "Let me guess, you're single." She looked up and let out a soft laugh. "That's not the issue here." I smirked. "I think it is. You packed a bag, cleared your weekend, and here you are. The lake's going to be great, and I promise, I'm not terrible company." Julie raised an eyebrow but seemed amused by my teasing. Before she could reply, Sabrina came bounding over, grabbing my hand with a grin. "Can we go now? It's going to be amazing, Oliver. You'll see." Julie chuckled. She's not wrong, she said, glancing at the sky. We are losing daylight. With that, we grabbed the rest of the bags, loaded the gear, and hit the road. The lake was only a half-hour drive, with a quick stop for propane along the way. Julie sat up front with me, the conversation flowing easily between us. There was a natural rhythm to it, like we'd known each other much longer than just a few weekends. Once we reached the lake and set up camp, the girls peeled off their oversized t-shirts, giggling and joking as they prepared to water ski. It was all familiar, almost comforting. But then I turned and saw Julie standing near the water, and suddenly, nothing felt familiar anymore. She'd always been small in stature, but seeing her now in a swimsuit, I noticed just how petite and toned she was. Yet there was nothing childlike about her, every inch of her was unmistakably feminine. Her swimsuit hugged her in a way that made my brain stall for a second, caught off guard. She wasn't being flashy or trying to draw attention, she was simply herself. And somehow, that was more striking than anything else. I shook the thought away and focused on helping with the boat. By the time the sun dipped low, everyone was starving. The girls insisted on cooking outdoors, so we fired up the camp stove and grill. I handled the sausages while they prepped the sides, potatoes, onions, and cans of pork and beans. There was something about food cooked outside that made it taste better, always. We sat at one of the park's picnic tables, sharing stories and laughter. Within an hour, Julie had transformed into Jules, as the girls affectionately called her. The conversation flowed with ease, as if we had been a tight-knit group for years. At one point, Jules turned to me, her voice softer now. You know, I didn't expect this sense of belonging. I've been through a lot, and I thought maybe I needed to figure everything out on my own. But maybe this is what I needed instead. She hesitated for a moment, then added, I get it now, why you protect Toby the way you do. I nodded slowly. Toby's my everything. She's the reason I've been able to hold it together these past 18 months. I honestly don't know where I'd be without her. Jules reached over and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. You're doing an amazing job, she said quietly. You're giving her stability and love, and trust me, that's more than most people ever get. In that moment, I realized how much her words meant. It wasn't just about sympathy, she understood. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something neither of us had expected. I know, Jules said softly. She tells Sabs and me everything. I'm so sorry, Ollie. Yeah, I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. Life has a way of kicking you in the teeth sometimes. We both sighed at the same time and then glanced up to see two very smug teenagers grinning at us from their chairs. They were whispering, not so subtly loud enough for us to hear. I shot them a look that only made them giggle harder. Later, as I drove Jules home, the mood lightened. She sat in the passenger seat, shaking her head in amusement as she recounted the girls' antics. They're trouble, but the good kind, she said with a laugh. What time tomorrow? I asked casually. Dinner? Maybe something else after. Also, do you think Toby could stay with Sabs while we're out? Jules smirked, tilting her head slightly. Very tempting. And yes, absolutely. She leaned over and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek before pulling back. The gesture was simple, yet it left warmth lingering on my skin. When I got inside, Toby was waiting for me, arms crossed and a playful glint in her eyes. Well, she demanded. Did you ask her out? Did you kiss her? I grabbed her in a hug, ruffling her hair as she squealed and bounced with excitement. Yes, and none of your business. You're so predictable, Dad, she teased, giggling as I swatted her lightly on the arm. The next evening, I took Jules to a small Italian restaurant, intimate, warm, and peaceful. We ate more than we should have, lingered over a bottle of wine, and talked for hours. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't weighed down by the past. Instead, I found myself looking ahead, wondering what possibilities the future might hold. Jules sat beside me in the booth, her body naturally leaning into mine. Without a second thought, I draped an arm around her shoulders. She didn't hesitate, she simply melted into me, looking up with a soft smile that made my heart stutter for a moment. It felt so effortless. So right. After that night, our thing became a regular occurrence. Sometimes it was dinner. Other times it was spontaneous adventures or long walks where we'd talk about everything and nothing. I didn't rush her, and she didn't rush me. But with each passing week, the connection between us deepened in ways I hadn't expected. There were charged moments, those lingering glances that told me she wanted more. And God knows I did too. But it wasn't just about the physical. I cherished being with her, not just as her boyfriend, but as her friend. We talked constantly, sharing our lives in small, meaningful ways. She'd text me ridiculous jokes during the day, and I'd send her things I knew would make her smile. It was new and steady, a kind of relationship built on trust and shared laughter. Rachel, however, seemed incapable of letting things go. She continued to push at boundaries. Every now and then, she'd make an effort to see Toby and would try to play nice, but whenever she started pushing too hard, I'd casually ask, "So, have you heard from Jerry lately?" That question always shut her up. One afternoon, she cornered me in the driveway. Her expression was tense, her voice tight with frustration. "How long is it going to take for you to forgive me?" she demanded. I stared at her, my gaze steady. "Forgive you for what, exactly? As far as I can tell, you don't even think you did anything wrong." She flinched, caught off guard by my response. Her face fell slightly, and she lowered her eyes. "Not once," I continued, my voice low but firm, "have I heard you say, 'I'm sorry, Rachel.' Not once." For a moment, she was speechless, the weight of my words hanging between us. But I knew better than to expect a real apology. Some wounds cut too deep for easy fixes, and I wasn't about to hand out forgiveness without accountability. She had to face the truth of what she'd done. Until then, she was just another ghost of the past I was learning to leave behind. Rachel's voice caught me off guard. "I was wrong," she said, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry. I tried to make Toby believe you were lying. I'm sorry for all of it." Hearing those words hit me like a freight train. But it wasn't anger that followed, it was clarity. I realized I didn't need to do anything. Life had already taken care of handling Rachel's mistakes. She was living with the consequences, and it showed. She took it even harder when she learned about Jules. One evening, after I'd dropped Toby off at her grandparents' house, Rachel stopped me as I was about to get into my car. "I heard you're dating one of Toby's friend's moms," she said, crossing her arms. There was a fire in her eyes, but also something that looked like hurt. I didn't respond, simply holding her gaze. "Is it true?" she pressed. I shrugged. "Not your business." Her jaw tightened. "Damn it, Oliver. I have a right to know." I let out a sharp laugh, the sound bitter. "No, Rachel. You don't." The nights with Jules became a new kind of normal, simple, comforting, yet full of anticipation. One evening, over dinner at home, Jules gave me a playful look across the table. "You know, Sabs and Toby think you're pretty perfect." I chuckled. "Oh yeah? I'm sure you don't." Her smile lingered as she leaned forward slightly. "If I think you're perfect too, why haven't you invited me to stay the night?" Her eyes sparkled with amusement, but there was a seriousness beneath the question. I choked on my drink, making her burst out laughing. "You haven't even thought about it, have you?" she teased. I swallowed hard, my voice rough but steady. "Jules, I've thought about it every day since that first moment on the boat. Since I saw you in that damn bikini." She grinned mischievously. "Good." I exhaled slowly, setting my drink down. I didn't want to push. Didn't want to rush anything. You won't, she assured me softly. I'm a little nervous too. I reached out, brushing a hand along her cheek, my touch gentle. There's nothing to be afraid of, I whispered. After a brief pause, I added, I love you, Julie Barnes. You know that, right? Her breath caught for a moment before she exhaled deeply, as if she'd been holding it in for far too long. I thought so, she murmured. But I needed to hear it. So, I said it again. I love you. Her smile deepened as she tightened her fingers in my hair. I love you too, Oliver. I pulled her closer, our lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and electric. The rest of the night unfolded like a dance, each movement instinctive, lost in a rhythm that felt larger than us both. We found each other again and again, two souls finally meeting without hesitation or fear. By the time we collapsed in each other's arms, tangled in the sheets, I pressed soft kisses to her forehead, her temple, and her lips. We whispered words neither of us fully understood, words that carried the weight of something unspoken but deeply real. Sleep came in fleeting moments, only to be broken by the warmth of rediscovered connection. The next morning, before Jules woke, I slipped into the bathroom and opened the small safe hidden inside. I had been holding on to something for the right moment, and I knew this was it. When I returned to the bedroom, she was curled beneath the blankets, waiting for me. I climbed into bed beside her and gently took her hand in mine. Looking into her deep brown eyes, I spoke softly. Julie, I began, my heart pounding. Will you marry me? Her eyes widened as I slid the ring onto her finger. It was a little loose, we'd need to get it resized, but in that moment, it was perfect. She held it up, turning it under the soft morning light. It's beautiful, she whispered, tears glistening as she looked back at me. I smiled as she leaned in and pressed her lips gently to my forehead. Later that day, Jules teased me as we planned to tell the girls. You know they already have everything figured out, right? The whole wedding, probably. I sighed dramatically. You're right. It's going to be out of my hands, isn't it? She smirked and kissed me one last time before reaching for her phone. Of course, I'm right. And just like that, the next chapter of our lives began. Together.